Hey guys, welcome to Next Gen Tech. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this, and check the description box below for deals and discounts.
So we are doing our big soldering workshop today, guys. I'm very excited to have Celtech Express with us. Barry, Michael, and I'm sorry, what was that? Kyle. Another guy from Celtech. MCTC, MOUNTWEST Community Technical College. My name's Rob Adkins. This is our DC Electronics program. This is our first year students. So everybody's kind of getting their hands on, learning some soldering techniques. I'm real excited because this is new that we're bringing into our school. This is something I'm looking forward to actually pushing forward with us through our program. And Barry Robinson, who is a dear friend of mine, and not only that, one of the best students I've ever been able to take under as far as in my entire teaching career. I've had him back at ITT Tech. He's a graduate, we'll call it many years ago. It's best to say, but Barry's had an illustrious career as far as you talking about electrician work, gadget work. He's invented, he repairs. Barry was doing phones before most of us had smartphones. So it's a real pleasure. We're blessed. This school is absolutely blessed to be able to have this talent come back to us. Barry will hopefully, and I'm pumping him up to be an adjunct instructor with us next semester. He's going to start in helping us with the automation PLC classes, and the sky's the limit because Barry can do a lot. So we'll see where that's going to go with that. But I'm not going to stand up here and talk a whole lot. I want you guys to really get into this neat technology we're about to learn today. So with that, I'm just going to introduce Barry Robinson. He can come up here and he can talk about the rest of the guys he brought with him and what's going on today.
Well, thank you, Rob. It's kind of hard to follow that. My name's Barry Robinson. I'm from Celtech Express. This is the owner, Michael. As Rob said, I went to ITT Tech. I got a degree there. Before I went to college, I was a master electrician for 25 years. I've been in the electronic field ever since the iPhone 3 came out. That's the phones I started on. I look forward to next semester teaching you guys, at least some of you guys, introduction to PLCs and ladder logic. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mike because he is the best we have, the best in the tri-state at Microsoldering, and he's going to do a workshop for us today.
Today, what we're going to do is we're going to work on some surface mount chips like BGA work, ports, like Hdmi port type stuff. I think that this is a vital skill to know if you guys are going into into electronics for sure. Especially with the introduction of more of like our electronic vehicles and stuff like that. Everything has PCB boards. If you guys can get down how to physically work with these chips on these boards, wherever you guys decide to get into, then you can kind of, they should have, schematics and troubleshooting and stuff like that for whatever you guys decide to get into. But I think this is definitely good stuff to know with how everything's going. I started Celtech. Me and Barry, we were in Grayson. At the time I was just had a bicycle, man, and I'd we'd find a cell phone on Facebook or something like that, and I'd bring it over to Barry, and he would fix it for me. And we were kind of doing that for a while, and thought that maybe one day, who knows, maybe one day we can start a business. And a side thing kind of grew into more than a side thing, and now we've got 4 locations in this area, and we employ, I think we've got 22 employees. So we're blessed, and with that, let's get started. I think first what we're going to do here is this is an HDMI port on an Xbox One S. All of your ports on any kind of a PCB board, whatever it may be, will be very similar to this. They are through board mounted, and then on the other side you got all your leads running to whatever it may be. So first things first is you got to get this thing out of here to replace it. Alright, so first things first is you want to mix your flux. Anything coming from factory will be lead-free solder. Lead-free has a much higher melting point than leaded. So what we like to do is mix that with leaded solder to get the melting point down so that when we're working with hot air, what we're working on melts before everything else does. Just makes it easier to work with. And we're going to go ahead and mix these with some leaded solder. So the way that you want to go about this is you want to heat up these pins here, and you just kind of feed your solder right into the iron like that, and it will just kind of mix with that solder that's already in there. I'm going to go through and do that on all these. Xbox boards, you have to use a ton of heat on these. Round runs throughout it's real big, runs throughout the whole board, and this takes a lot more heat than smaller boards do. Now it's going to be kind of hard to see what I'm doing right here, but a lot of work with soldering is like by feel. You have to feel when it comes loose. You don't want to have any pressure when you're trying to pull a cord off, because you'll rip all those leads off the board. Then you have to jump all those to whatever circuit it runs to. A lot of those circuits sometimes you can't see it on the board, so you'd have to go through your schematics and stuff like that. So it's best to just try not to rip them off. And you do that by feel. You just assist it out of the board. I'm holding on to this board, and I've got this board upside down, so I'm going to assist it out and let gravity do a lot of the work for me. By the way, I'm at 450 degrees Celsius on my hot air gun. As you can see, these boards take a tremendous amount of heat. Anything else would have been melted long ago. These boards take a ton of heat. A lot of times, guys, when they're starting doing this, or they're thinking, it's like, man, I've had this on here for so long, something has to be wrong. But it's just these boards take a ton of heat.
When you said this process is what you did, you added a lead-based solder, the flux, to bring down the resistance of heat to the non-lead-based, correct?
Exactly, yes. That helps me to where just this is going to fall out first before all my VGA chips and stuff like that falls out, Alright, it's starting to come loose, and I do not want to pull this out. I want to assist it out, so I'm just kind of waiting on it to feel like it's going to come out by itself, and there it goes. If you want no pressure whatsoever pulling that out. You rip those leads on the other side, which on this it's not that big of a deal, because you can, if that were to happen, because you can kind of see those lines on there. You can see where it runs to. If you were to rip any of those up there, you can run it right to where it goes, but that's not all boards are like that, where you can just see it right there on the top level. But so yeah, that's why you just want to assist it out. Yeah, those right there. You can, if you were to rip any of those, you can run it right to where it's supposed to go. In this case, but yeah, so we didn't rip any of them out. So what you would want to do here is now we're going to go over all of this on the top side with the lead-based solder as well. Always flux first. And I can't stress enough the importance of good equipment for your soldering iron, especially when you get the real micro stuff, which we'll do here in a minute. If you're on your real micro tips, if you add solder to it and you see that that solder wants to run up to the base and not to the tip, it's very hard to do real micro level stuff. So you want a real good, I've got the Hakko FX100. It uses heat induction to heat the tips. That way I've got that heat at my tip just the same as the base. If your iron isn't worth nothing, I mean, you're not soldering, you know what I mean? So it's definitely good to have good equipment when working with this stuff. So I'm just going to fill up these holes here. I want to kind of like get in there a little bit to make sure it mixes up real good. Now on all these pads here, I can go right over them because it's a pretty decent soldering iron. But whatever iron you have, you want to kind of go in the direction that it's going. If you put down too much pressure, you can rip these pads off, and again, then you have to jump it. So you just want to kind of go over all these. You want these all to end up to be like kind of like fluffy pillows. Now there's a ton of ways to do anything. This is just how I do this. Pretty much whenever I do this, I get it all to solder just with hot air. Obviously I'm trying to get the job done as quickly as possible, so I do it that, and you know, it pretty much solders just with hot air. However, I am going to show you how to go over each lead as well. So we'll just again put some flux on all this. Alright, and I'm just going to pre-10 these. And wherever I've bridged those, I'll just work those out whenever I'm done. Whenever you do have a bridge, whether it's on this side or on the PC board itself, what you do is you just kind of go in between both pins and quickly just pull it out. And sometimes you have to clean it, do it again, clean it, do it again, and then usually you can unbridge if you did make any bridges. What I like to do is I'll hold the port like this, just kind of holding it with some tweezers to where I can push it right through. You can use a solder sucker if you wanted to suck the solder out of those the through board holes if you want, or if you heat it up enough, you should be able to melt it and just push it right through. And then when you let the heat off, you just kind of hold it there for a second and let that solder melt. We're going to do that method right now, just trying to sink it through the solder. What I'm going to be looking for is for those through board holes. I'm going to look for it to all get liquefied, and then that should let me know whenever it's time to go ahead and push it on through. So you can kind of see how they're getting liquefied up there. They're about ready. I got that side heated up. The left side's not quite yet. Once they all look nice and liquidy, I'll try to push this through. Okay. I'm going to push this straight through. Now I'm going to keep this held here and let the solder dry or cool down. So it should keep it in place for me. Alright, so now I've got the port in place. So these are actually all soldered already. From factory, this is how they solder it. They're soldered on the bottom. I mean, normally I'd be done with my job already. But let's say if some of these were not soldered, we're going to go over each of these pins. Plus, the better the connection, you know, you got to think this is people, they're plugging in, unplugging, plugging in. So, I mean, the better the connection, the better. So I'll show you how we go over and do that now. So again, we're going to put flux over these. And what you'll notice is that some of these pins will liquefy very quickly, and some of them take longer. The ones that take longer are your ground pins. Okay. So the way that you go about doing these pins like this is you want to put your iron there, if you want to use your laser if you can. I want to touch the pad and the front of the pin. So I want to lay that iron like right there, but touching the pin and the pad, heating them both up at the same time. Alright, so we're going to start right here. I have my solder ready to feed into it. So I'm going to touch them both like this. And you'll kind of see it liquefy. I don't know if you can see it on the screen at all, but you'll kind of see it liquefy a little bit. And once it does, what you do is you like feed it straight into it, which you kind of feed it right into it like that, and then pull straight out. And this it's kind of hard for you guys to see, but it's that made like a real good connection on there. And also going through here, it's not going to be as pretty. Whenever you use your hot air, it just kind of, at the end of it, it kind of sucks it all together and it looks like beautiful. And that makes sure that you don't have any cold joints or anything like that. So then we're just going to go right on down the line here. Kind of feed that right into it, out, touch this one. And this one's a ground, so it's going to take a little bit longer to, as you can see, I'm touching it and it's not accepting it, and there it just started. Pull it out, and just kind of go right on down the line. Once it's hot enough, then it will, the solder will just go on home, basically. You know what I mean? That's what I'm heating up, and that's what it's attracted to. This one here is a ground, so it takes a little bit longer. You have to kind of hold your iron on these for a little bit longer. But then when I pull it straight out, that makes sure that it's just on what I'm wanting to heat up here. This one here is ground as well. Also, always remember to fill your tips up with solder whenever you're not using it. This preserves your tips so that it does not oxidize. If you've got a tip that's all oxidized and stuff, again, you're not soldering. You know what I mean? So you want to have nice, clean tips always. If you do get a tip that is oxidized, you can use like a, I don't know, what grit sandpaper would you say? Sand that down, and then keep on filling it with solder again. Or I've got like I've got tip tinner stuff that they make as well that you can kind of fill it up. Do that several times. If you do have a tip that's oxidized and stuff, you want to make sure that that the pad is soldered to the lead itself. And this isn't the prettiest looking stuff right now, but when we do the hot air, it'll just all soak up together and look perfect. And make sure that you have good connections. All right, so most ports have plastic in it. What you want to do, so now that this has leaded solder in it, it has a much lower melting point. So I'll go down, which this is still high, but this is an Xbox board, so it takes a lot more heat. I can drop down this heat now, and when you're working with plastic, you just want to keep that iron moving. If you're just blasting the port with hot air, you're going to melt all the plastic inside the port, and it's just going to be, it's not going to work. So I'm going to put a different tip on here, a more precise tip, just to try to heat up what I want to heat up here. And I'm going to go over all these. I'm just going to keep on kind of like going left, right, and you'll see all these pins, all the solder on these pins kind of just like suck into the pads and stuff. So I'm going to come back from right here, and I'm just going to keep moving left and right so that I don't melt the plastic inside the HDMI port. And it takes a little bit longer doing this because I've lowered my heat and I'm also moving. But you'll notice those pins start to suck up that solder. You see those kind of starting to liquefy, some of them. The grounds have not yet, which now some of them are starting to. Alright. I know it's a little bit blurry on that screen, but basically you can see them all liquefy and then kind of like suck into the pad itself. Whenever you're done with this part, you can just kind of do a final inspection and make sure that everything is soldered. These are all soldered just fine. And the last thing that you would want to do is just make sure that where I kept solder on there and pushed it through and made those, those are nice and fat, and they'll be strong enough for plugging in or unplugging. You want to make sure that it's strong enough to withstand people, always unplugging and plugging and stuff. And those are nice fat through holes there, so that should be real nice and strong. And yeah, that is, any port on anything is basically this way. You've got multiple pins that goes to whatever circuit it may be, and then it's usually 4 mounts through the board. So that should do any sort of port at all. We have another HDMI port over here. I don't know if any of you guys would like to kind of go through there and just try if you want. Okay. And you can rest your hand on the board like this, right? So then I can feed it whenever I'm ready to put it in. You're going to use this iron right here, clean of course, flux first, but you're going to touch the first pin and you're going to see on here whenever it gets liquefied. And whenever it does, what you want to do, let's see if I can see it on this side, you'll want to actually feed it right, it's kind of hard looking on the screen to do this. You're going to want to feed it right there. On the tip. You're right to the tip of the lead itself.
Right, like I can see how it's got like the little bubbly and then kind of like flattens down, so I want to touch right there on that tip. Right there, yeah, and then you're going to see it kind of feed into it. Then with your iron here, then you're just going to kind of just pull it straight out. Don't go to the side because then you'll make a bridge, which I'm going to purposely make a bridge and show you guys how to fix that. But you'll just want to pull it straight out so you don't bridge it. What you're going to want to do is put you a nice layer of flux all the way down there. It's a little hard to press that one, but just a nice layer of flux all over the whole thing. That's probably fine. It's probably enough. And we can start right over there on the right-hand side. Now, always don't work around the board. Let your work around you, right? So if something feels like it's uncomfortable to get there, just move that board. You know what I mean? So start here on this right one. You're going to put your iron right there and touch the top of the lead and the pad itself both at the same time, and you'll notice whenever it starts to look more liquefied, and then that's when you're going to feed the solder right into it. There you go, right there. And you'll want to wait until it all looks liquefied. Then you feed the solder into it and try to touch that solder right to the pin or the tip of your iron.
whenever you start to accumulate a bunch of solder right there on that side, go ahead and clean it off, because you don't want it to mix with that or make a big giant blob or something on your pins. It's best to try to avoid a bridge, but I'll show you how to fix a bridge if it happens. So what I would recommend is try to have the solder that you're holding. So here's your iron, right? Straight, and try to be straight onto it. Come at it from this angle. Your solder. Yeah, from that angle right there, so that you're not touching the base of the iron, and because that's where, because wherever's hottest is where it wants to go, And this is something that's just experience, guys. Like, it's very difficult at first to get used to it, and just with experience, you kind of get more relaxed, I guess. Now, this is probably going to sound funny or something, but like, the more that you hesitate and kind of like,
absolutely,
like you're like, whoa, 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 it's like you'll never get it done, and you start shaking more. It's almost like you just have to, I want to touch it to this pin and just go in and do it. You know what I mean? And I know it probably sounds funny to just say, just do it, right?
No, I definitely get what you're saying. Any kind of hesitation, you start to shake, and it's kind of hard to stay.
Yeah. You just want to, like, I'm going to this pin and just go for it, You're right there in the perfect place. What you want to do is wait until you'll see that the pad and the pin both looks liquidy, and then that's when you're going to want to move your solder in. Because right now, like, I'm not sure if it's getting, it's hard for me to see, but I'm not sure if it's getting liquefied, and your solder's just going straight to your iron and not to the pad.
Yeah, I see that now.
Yeah, so hold your iron there first. Wait until it looks all nice and liquidy, then move your solder in. Yeah, so just wait right there, and you'll see it all start to look liquidy. And then try to touch the very tip, or the pad or the lead itself, because then it'll suck right into the lead and not your iron. Yeah, you want to touch the pad and the front of the pin at the same time, just like that. Wait until it looks liquidy, and then you try to feed the solder.
I think it just bridge like you were talking about.
Right. And that's okay. I'll show you how to fix a bridge whenever that happens. So you can try to fix it right now if you'd like. So here's what you're going to do. With a clean iron, you're going to go in between both of these right here, and then pull it out. And then clean your iron. If it hasn't fixed it yet, go back, pull it out, clean it, keep on doing it until your bridge is gone. It would be best if you can go in straight, like not to the side like that. If you can go in straight to it, go right in the middle and pull out. And you can use two hands too. Sometimes I'll use both my hands holding the iron so that I'm not shaking so much, and then you're going to kind of like rub against the board itself, like down against the board, pull it out. And depending on how bad the bridge is, I mean, sometimes I have to do that 10-15 times until it actually pulls out. Or another thing I can do if it's like a terrible bridge is you can use hot air and wick, and you'll feed the wick right into the bridge, and with the hot air it'll just suck right into the wick.
I can definitely see what you're saying. It takes multiple tries to get it out.
Yeah, kind of try to do it a little bit quicker, because what's going to happen is that you're going to heat up those pins, and wherever it's hot, that's where your solder wants to go. You know what I mean? So if you do it quicker, it's just your iron that's hot, and I want to stick to that more. Try to start it above your bridge. Up here, start it above your bridge, and then that way the base of your tip is touching your bridge, and then pull it out quickly. Alright, so we're on this one right here, this HDMI port. I guess go for any of the pins there. And with this iron here, you're just going to want to touch the pad and the tip of the lead, right? Then with this solder, or that's the big stuff, you don't want to do that. Use the smaller stuff so that it doesn't make a bridge. I like to do it like this. Here, you're going to hold it, like this, right? And I position it, and if you got like a big bubble here on the top, just break this off, right? So I hold it like this, and you can rest your hand on the board, and in that way, see, you can like, you know what I mean? You can like feed it straight into whichever one that you're going for. Oh, and by the way, so like the longer you're in there messing around, once your flux is like more burnt, it doesn't work the same. So like, you know, I never did have to change my flux because I just did them all quickly. But like it's looking like, see how it's like more like pasty kind of? Yeah. So like the flux is going to make this work a little bit better. But I try to put some more flux in there. So I try that one right there. And then from that other side with your solder, try to feed it into it. And if you can touch the pin itself once it looks liquidy, it'll go right to the pad in the pin, not your iron. You can put solder just on the tip and then just try to touch it. However, you would have more chance of a cold joint. Your hot air, I guess, would fix that in theory. But whenever you feed it straight to it, it's got hot enough to go to it, and it's a better connection, I guess. However, you could just put solder on the tip of your iron and just try to like put it on it, I guess, and then let the hot air do its job, you know. And that's what I mean. That's why I was saying that there's really multiple ways to do anything. You know what I mean? It's kind of more what you're comfortable with. So I tell you what, for a beginner, it might actually be a little bit easier if you did just go ahead and put a little bit of solder, a small amount, to your tip, right? Just go ahead and add just a little bit to your tip, not too much to where it like makes a big giant blob, but try to add just a little bit to your tip, and then just try to touch the top of the pin with it. Mm-hmm. It probably would be on your first time doing this to add it to the iron first and just try to just put it on the pin and let the hot air do it until you get more experience to feed it in. Once any of this gets up to temperature, your solder just like it just goes home. And like when we do a BGA chip here in a second, you've got tons of pads with solder on the bottom of the chip, and you'll find that even if I'm crooked on where it needs to go on the ball grid array, with the hot air, you'll actually see the chip go, and it'll just suck right into place. You know what I mean? I'll show you with that here in a minute. But once it gets up to temperature, it's like it just goes right on home, basically. Your left hand. All right, so we should have enough room here for you to hold this on this side. We'll just go ahead and move this to the other side. So you want to hold it like this. I usually rest it against the board, such as like this. And you've got your iron. Then you can feed it, see like that, you can like feed it straight in like that. So if I were you, like hold this a little bit closer to the edge of it, like be closer like this. Like through here, it's like, I mean, that'd be very hard to maneuver, you know what I mean? Yeah. Hold it a little bit closer to it. Just put a little bit of solder on that tip of your iron, and then let's try to just touch the iron to the pin itself instead of trying to feed it to it. It might be a little bit too difficult on your first time.
Like that?
Yeah, exactly. And what you would do is after each one, well, you actually got that one, and then you would clean off your tip and you can try to do the next one. So we're going to move on to one of the styles of a BGA chip. This one, as you can see, the bottom is basically a big ground, and then you've got all these here on the side, and that's what you need to make connections on this style of a BGA chip. So like always, the first step, and also any chip that you take off, you want to take note of the orientation. You're either going to have a dot in one of the corners, or just see the way that the text is written, and then that's going to be the, and if you're looking at schematics, anywhere that the dot is, that's going to be A1. Just if you're looking at that, wherever A1 is, that's where your dot is. If you're putting on a new chip, if you don't have any writing and just a dot only, and if you're looking at schematics, that's where A1 is. It's up there. All right, so we're going to go over all this with flux. We're going to use hot air to take off the chip itself. And again, just like I said with the taking off the HDMI port, it's by feel. You're assisting it up. You're not pulling it up at all. You assist it up. If it's holding on there too, you're going to pull the pad right out of the board, and then you got to jump to the circuit. All right, so yeah, we're just going to heat up this whole entire area. In this situation, I don't have to worry about anything around me. If I'm working on an iPhone board, sometimes you have to be mindful of what you're working around, which will do an iPhone board here in just a second. So you just kind of like hang on to whatever chip it is that you're working on. And you'll feel it in your tweezers whenever it gets loose. See, like it's loose, but I didn't take it up yet, right? Now it's fully loose and I can pull it up, right?
Show them how small that chip actually is in real life.
Well, this one's actually really big.
Oh,
But,
is it?
yeah, this kind of small, but you know, with stuff that we work on, this is actually really big. You can see like those little caps right there next to it. See that C7D5? You know, like that's actually kind of big too. It gets very, very small. Okay, so just like before, you always want to go over it with flux, and we're going to add leaded solder to all of this. You can see that some of those are bridged. You just want to make sure that none of them are bridged before we put our chip on there. And what you're aiming for is for all of these to be like fluffy pillows, right? Now, I left a little bit of solder there in the middle. That's your big ground on there. You do not want that to be raised up too high, because if you put your chip down there, you're not going to be able to reach all of your pads whenever you put the new chip on there. So what I normally do is I heat up that ground all the way, and then I'm going to pull it straight off like that. And I'm kind of like cleaning. I'm taking some of this off because I want this to be more flat than anything. Just enough to have a little thin layer of solder on there. Alright, so something like that. So it's like a nice thin layer and it's not raised up, so my chip can lay all the way down against the board. By the way, this chip is the Hdmi retimer. Many times with these Xboxes, they'll have no video, and your HDMI port is perfect. This chip right here, a lot of times is the culprit for an Xbox that has no image and it's not the HDMI port. So the best thing that you can do here is you want to kind of see if I can show you on here. You see the little tiny pads on the side of this chip? That's what I want to line up on all the pads on the board, right? Now you don't have to get it perfect right off the bat, but you want it to be somewhat close for whenever we start to use the hot air. So you just kind of like position it a little bit into place, roughly about right there. Kind of hold the chip into place, and what happens here before it solders all the way is it'll kind of tack in place a little bit. Then you can go ahead and let go of it. And did you see how the chip moved by itself? Did you guys see that? So, well, it's kind of moving around all over the place, but it will actually, anytime that you're doing a VGA chip, it'll actually like go right on to where it needs to go. I've got my hot air up a little bit too, like it's up a little bit too high, so it's wanting to push it because it's got that big giant ground pin down there. So it's kind of freely moving around a little bit. But like whenever it's just a VGA chip, it'll just like go perfectly into place. And what you would want to do with these now is you want to look at these little connections here on the side, and like see like that one that looks raised up. Looks like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over. That's a good connection. But those other ones where they might be connected, but it's, you know, I don't want to put a whole entire place or Xbox back together and then find it's not connected right, and then you got to take it all the way apart again. So might as well make them all look like that one right there. Okay, so it's kind of similar when we were doing our HDMI port, going over these. You can either put solder on the tip and touch it, or feed it to the pin the same way as the HDMI port. So with these, I'm going to be touching the side of the chip and the pad, and you kind of feed it into it like that. And this one right here is actually a ground, and grounds always take a little bit longer to get up to temperature. So sometimes this one here, even when it's done, it's going to look like a blob, but the hot air is going to take care of that for us. basically I've made sure that it's touched the side of the chip and the pad itself, and then the hot air will make it perfect after we're all done. I'm just going to do this one side just to kind of show you guys, like if you would look through the scope, it's not the most, I mean it would work, but it's not the prettiest thing in the world. I always like to make sure if someone else opens it up, it looks like somebody knew what they were doing, right? So if you go over with hot air right here, see if I can get this where you guys can see it like liquefy and suck into place and all that. Okay, so I guess keep your eye on the one at the very top. That's the ground. It's probably going to be the last one that liquefies. So yeah, you just kind of like keep it moving like this, the hot air. Did you see how it just kind of like sucked right into place like that? Now I've got a little solder ball in between those two, but if I just touch my iron to it, it'll take it right out. You're looking for a nice raised connection. It looks blurry on the camera here, but you can see that there's a connection from the pad, and it's like kind of like angled as like a nice connection right up to the side of the chip. That way I know that that is fully connected, and I don't have to worry about it taking it apart again to do this again. You know what I mean? If all of yours look like that, yeah, like you see that one right there on that green line, you can see it's kind of like angled up, like a ramp almost, from the board to that. It's like a ramp going up right there, yeah. Like you want them all to look like that, so that you make sure that you've got connections to the chip. So that's one style of VGA. The other style of VGA chip is you've got nothing on the side, and it's just a ton of pads underneath on the bottom of the chip itself. Now this is an iPhone board. As you can see, everything is much more tightly condensed. This is where you have to be a lot more careful with shaking and moving around, because you can knock into something else, and then you have to keep fixing everything that you mess up. Like always, flux is your first step. That mixes in with that solder. Now again, this is by feel. I'm going to hold on to this chip and then pull it up once it feels like it's loose. Alright, so we're going to heat up this whole area right here. And I'm just going to hold on to this chip right here. You can see that this is bubbling up way faster than the Xbox did. Alright, so see, it came loose, but I didn't pull it up yet because there was still some grounds on the edges that was still connected. I didn't want to pull that out. So you want to, when it feels totally loose, that's when you would pull a chip off like that. So, just like with anything else, what you want to do is you want to go over all of these pads with leaded solder, where it has lead-free right now. We're going to mix all of this with leaded solder. Just going to add a little bit more flux. And when your pads are like this on a VGA chip, it is, think of it, I mean, it's much more dangerous to mess around with these pads until I mix it with leaded solder. Think of it almost as like a balloon on a stick. Like I can knock off any of those very easily right now, and then you're in a really bad place, because then you would have to, imagine if you knocked one off there in the middle, you're going to have to run a jumper in between all of those and not bridge that together. And it's doable, but you definitely want to try to avoid doing that. You know what I mean? So you would take your iron here, and we're going to go over all of these with leaded solder. And the trick is that you want all of these balls on here to look about similar in size. You do not want them like have a big giant one right there in the middle or something, because that can make a bridge whenever you put it on there, or the chip isn't flat and it won't solder on there right. Now this particular, if you can see on here, looks like I probably trained somebody and did this board before. Can you see this little jumper? Barry, can you show them where the jumper is right there? Now, the iPhone 6 Plus had something else called touch disease. It was basically this pad right here would lose continuity to the board, and your screen didn't have any touch. It was a very super common problem on 6 Plus. Follow it on the board, and it runs to a pad right here. And what you do is basically you scratch away the board, and then you can run a jumper from this pad up to there. I use a solder mask afterwards to keep it down there in place, and then you put your chip back on the board. That's a pretty common issue with a lot of VGA chips. It's basically just an engineering fault that this particular pad would go bad or whatever. Like iPhone 7 Plus has an audio IC problem where they have 4 pads that goes bad. You have to run 4 pads underneath it, or 4 jumpers underneath it to the pads. So that's what that jumper is. It's hard to see with the reflection in here, but there's a jumper that's being ran to that one to reconnect that pad to that circuit on that chip. So yeah, what you would do on any of these VGA chips, you just want to look to make sure that they all look about similar in size. You don't have any big giant balls or anything like that. And once they are all about similar in size, it's ready for us to try to put the chip back on. This particular fault with the 6 Plus, you can actually reuse the same chip because it wasn't a chip level fault, it was a board fault where the pad would come loose. But we're going to put a new chip on there just for time constraints. You could reball your original if you wanted to. Just depends on whatever you're working on, what that particular fault is. So again, just like with the other VGA chip, you want to kind of put it into place. However, the hot air itself is going to put it exactly where it needs to go. I'm going to try to get this camera where you guys can see the chip. It'll actually shift one side into place and then the other side into place, just with hot air itself. Alright, so with any of these chips, what you want to do is it goes about right there, so you would want to hold it in place a little bit, right? And we're going to start with the hot air. Once it's been on there for a second, I can go ahead and kind of let go a little bit. And pay attention to the corners of this chip. I had it pretty close to where it goes, but it shifted just barely into place. And the way that you test these chips to make sure that it's on there right is you can actually give it a little bit of a nudge right here in the corner. You see how I do that and kind of like rubber band it back into place? Did you see that at all? If you touch the corner of it and it rubber bands back into place, then you know that it's up to temperature and it's all soldered to the correct places. I don't care if anybody would like to try that. However, that is way harder to do than an HDMI port. So I don't care if anybody wants to try it. It's quite a bit more difficult putting on a VGA chip. It takes definitely more. I would probably start with like practice boards before ever trying to work on somebody's board or anything like that, or at least junk boards. You know what I mean? What I do is I put my tweezers where it's going to be at, right? And you can rest this against a board. It doesn't have to be hovering or anything like that. So like, see, I got my hand rested, so I'm not shaking or anything like that. And you're just going to hold it right there. Then I bring my hot air over, and you're gonna feel it, right? You're gonna feel it get loose. And then you're going to pull it straight up, not to the side or anything like that, because you got all kinds of stuff around you, so you don't want to
mess up.
Yeah, exactly.
Or damage anything.
So what I usually do is I get my hot air ready. Go ahead and hold this in this hand. Go ahead and hold on to that chip. And bring the hot air. Alright, so just point it right there to it. And you're going to feel this become loose. Whenever it does, you're going to assist it straight upwards. All right, go ahead and pull it straight up. Now, sometimes it'll scare you to death.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of jumped the gun on that a little bit.
A little bit too soon, yes. And
Yeah.
you actually see right here, you got a full tab.
Yeah, I see it all already.
Now, it'll scare you to death whenever you see that. However, whenever you check your programs for, like I've got a program called ZXW that shows me all of these circuits for the iPhones, right? The no connect pads come up easier than the pads that are on a circuit, right? That one just so happens to be a no connect pad, so it's like, thank God, you know what I mean? You don't have to run a jumper to that one.
Feel better about situation.
So that's probably why that one came up easier, is because it's a no connect pad, right? But it was just a tad too soon. Now let's try to put one on now. So the first thing that you're going to do is let's take your flux right here and just do a nice little thin layer over all of that. Now, do not touch the tip of that cable to the pads itself, because like I was saying, it's like a balloon on a thin stick right now. It can knock off extremely easy. And that's actually even fine right there, because whenever you put your iron in there, it's going to kind of like melt out, right? Yep, just like that. So one good thing about flux that is a little bit more burnt up is that it's kind of more tacky. It's going to keep your IC chip in place a little bit easier. And the thing that you're going to shoot for is that you want this to be in position as closely as possible. You'll see, like right now, you can still see the pads right there, so that needs to be shifted upwards a little bit. And you want to go a little bit, the whole chip to the left, because you're kind of sitting on that trailer park of caps over on the left side. See that? Right there. Okay. Now, it's a lot harder when you first start out to hold it and know when to release it. Okay. Always best for you to hold on to it and then so that it doesn't blow away. But when I first started, this is how I put it. This is how I put chips on, because I was too shaky and I was moving the chip around all over the place. And even whenever I did mine, it started to move, but I saved it. But you know, I knew how to do that quickly enough. You know what I mean? Now go ahead and bring your hot air over here. I'm not even going to go a little bit lower. Don't go in super fast. Let's say if this was your hot air, okay? You're going to just kind of like slowly come in and keep your eye on that chip.
Make sure
you don't want it to fly away or move
kind of
away or something like
shit.
that. And slowly come in towards it, right? I usually keep my tweezers nearby. I would keep it like somewhere just, like you don't have to be like right up on it, but you can keep it nearby. If it does shift out of place, you can push it back into place. Okay, go ahead and just don't touch it at all. Just watch what's going to happen. So, all right, just let it do that. You're going to notice it kind of bubble. Watch that chip. It's going to shift one side and then the other side right into place. And once both sides have shifted, you're usually right where it needs to go. Did you see how it just went bam, right into place?
Yeah, I barely just had to barely tap it.
Yeah, so you tapped it just enough to get it. What it was is you were stuck on these guys right here. That's what it was. And if you would have been just a hair up, it would have did it all by itself. But you saw how it just like, bam, sunk into place and then sunk down.
Didn't even have to touch it, just barely tapping it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's it. That was actually a really good job. That was actually really good.
Appreciate you, fellas.
Extremely good job.
Yeah, and that's on any sort of PCB board. They all use these VGA chips just like that. I mean, if you can do that on an iPhone, you can do that on an appliance board, you can do that on whatever it may be. Everything goes on just like these do. The only thing that I haven't showed you yet is just like these capacitors. Those are a lot easier to deal with. If you take your hot air, you just hang on to the side of them. They pop straight off. Then just with your iron, you just touch the one side with solder, touch the other side with hot solder, and then I usually take my tweezers just to move it around a little bit, make sure it's on there. You know what I mean? But that's how you do any of those caps or anything like that. You know, I just hold on to them like this, hot air. I'll just go ahead and do it. Let's say if this guy was the problem for whatever reason. See, it comes straight off like that. You can most likely put it right back on, like if I got a new one, or sometimes I'll go over it with leaded solder again to get the melting point down, or just to put it right back on. You can do this with hot air or an iron, one or the other. And you'll see once it's in there, like just like with the chip, you can like give it a nudge and it almost like rubber bands back into place. And that's putting on any of the filters, any of the capacitors, anything like that. It goes on just like that, and then you give it a little. It's on there. It ain't moving, so you're connected in there. But everything that we went over just now, that's all of the styles of on a surface mount board. That's all of them. So it's no matter what it may be, even these big giant CPUs, it's just a ton of those on there. But it goes on the exact same way, no matter what it may be. That's the little side mount ones, the BGA underneath, or a port. That's everything that's on a PCB board. So just have to keep practicing at it. Maybe take a junk board or a practice board. They even sell blank practice boards on eBay or something like that. You just kind of practice with it. Put it on a BGA chip. See how it goes right into place with the hot air and stuff. And after a while, you'll be surprised at what you can do on these. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that we didn't go over is, like troubleshooting, diagnostics, stuff like that, which you never stop learning. That's a life for, that's a forever thing. You keep on learning, and, as new models come out, they have different signature faults or, something that I've seen this before. So that's just something that you kind of do forever, Or if you guys got on with a company, an engineering company somewhere, they would definitely have diagnostic tools or something like that, or schematics on how to work with it or how to troubleshoot, But yeah, I mean, that's basically it, guys. That is working with surface mount components.